We begin today the Gemara at the bottom of Mem Beis Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom of the page. We're discussing over here the halacha of a Nazir that's not allowed to become Tomei during his Nazirus. And specifically we're talking about if he became Tomei once and becomes Tomei a second time, so what happens now? Is he Chayiv a second time? He was already Tomei, so it's not really adding anything to the Tumah. So the Gemara brought a machlokes about this between Rabba and Rav Yosef regarding what Rav Huna said about this. According to Rabba, Rav Huna said that there's a difference. If you were Tomei once and you become Tomei a second time, there's no separate chiyuv. But he brings 2 psukim, that one pasuk says lo yitama, and the other pasuk says lo yavai. Lo yavai doesn't just mean a regular tumah, but it means not to come into a tent where there's tumah under the tent or under the roof of this house. And here he says, if there's a tumah and there's a biyah over here coming into this place of tumah, will add to your tumah. That's what Rabbi said. Now, it's not exactly clear what the pshat in that is, what Rabbi meant to say. The Gemara here is going to clarify what he means. So this next aval here, this goes back to this opinion of Rabbi. So the lashon, this is a quote of the lashon that Rabbi said before. Aval tumah v'tumah loy. Before, Rabbi said that if this Nazir was Tomei once and he becomes Tomei a second time, so then he's not Chayiv a second time, because if he's already Tomei, the second time doesn't add anything. As the Gemara explains, why not? Because he's already Tomei, so it doesn't add the second time anything. If so, the question is, Tumeh ubiye nami, if he's already Tomei, and now he comes into a place of Tumeh, where he's under the roof of Tumeh, why over there does Rabbi say that according to Rav Huna, we learn from the pasuk that he will be chayiv a second time? He's already Tomei. What's the difference? The Gemara is understanding right now that the pshat over here is tumah v'tumah means the person is touching a mace, and while he's touching one mace, so now he goes and touches another mace. He's already Tomei once. How should he become Tomei a second time? So the same thing should be if a person is touching a mace and then he comes into a place where there's a tumah of oil, so he's already touching the mace and now he comes into the tumah of oil. What's added by coming into the tumah of oil? Why here do we learn from the pasuk that he is going to be chayiv a second time? Logically, there's no difference between them. Rav Yechanan answers, that's not what we're talking about. The point of Rav Yechanan's answer here is, we're not speaking about a situation where the person is already touching the mace before he enters into the oil of the tumah. Rather, kan bebayis. Over here, when it says that he's going to become Tomei, he's going to be over the Isser twice, and he'll be chayiv twice, it's when he enters into a house, and right before he enters into the house, he was not Tomei yet. When he enters into the house, so he's being over 2 psukim. Number 1, lo yitama, by entering into the house. Because there's a mace in this house, you're becoming Tomei. And if you only just touch the airspace of this house, you become Tomei. That's one thing. And then there's lo yavai. When you fully enter the house, so then you become Tomei because you're under the same roof as the mace. In other words, the point that Rabbi Yechon is saying is, babayis, bevasachas. At the same moment when you enter into the house, you're becoming Tomei. And lo yavai as well. Both of these psukim apply bevasachas, that you're over on both of them together, and therefore you're going to be chayiv for both of them. And kam basada. But when he said that there's tumah v'tumah, that's in a situation where the person is out basada. So if you're out basada, so then over there you can't say that the person would be chayiv twice. There's no 2 different tumahs that are taking place. If he's touching 2 mesim at the same time, it's the same lo yitama. It's not that there are no 2 different isurim for this. When you walk into a house, so there's a tumah, you metami yourself, and there's also lo yavai. You enter into a place, into a house, a roof, where under the same roof with this mace. So there's 2 different psukim that apply, that you're over. But basada, becoming tomei to 2 mesim outside in the field, there is no 2 different things that you could say that you become tomei to, and therefore over there, take, there's no 2 yisurim. That's the point that Rabbi said before. Okay, so here the Gemara now will ask on this, that the point of Rabbi Yechanan's answer is that this is all happening bevasachas. As he enters into the house, so he's touching this tumah that's inside the house as he enters, because the entire house, the halacha of the tumah, when there's a tumah inside a house, there's a mace under this roof, it's as if the entire airspace is filled with a mace. So the moment you walk into the house, your body touches the airspace of this house, it's like you touched the mace himself. That's one tumah. And then there's the other tumah when you're under the roof, the same roof together with this mace, that's tumas oil. But the Gemara now will ask, these two tumas do not happen b'vas achas. Why not? B'bayis nami, even if you're entering into a house, kivin the ayul yodeh, as soon as you stick your hand into the house, is stav. So now you touch tumah. Like I said, the whole ear space is like filled with a mace. So you just touch tumah. So ki ayul kulahai, so if you enter completely, tamahu, you were already tummy from before. So how could you say that he would be chayiv twice because bevas achas he's being over the two yisurim? No, he is already tummy before as soon as he touches the ear space with his hands. And so once he's already tummy, if he now walks in fully, why should he be over a second isser if he was already from before tummy by touching the ear space of the house? So the Gemara is going to try a few different options of how to explain that this could happen in 1 second. Bevas achas. So Elam Rabbi Lazar says, Tzirif Yodai, if he spread out his hand and his hand went into the house before his body, so you're right, Mishum Tumeke, he became Tummy first, so he'll be Chayiv for that, Mishum Piyaleke. But now he's not going to be Chayiv for entering into the house because he's already Tummy from before. But V'tzirif Gufoi, but if he kept his hand right near his body and he came into the house, he didn't stick his hand in first. He came in all like his whole body came in together. Then tumah bi ba'adei adadika also. So then he comes into the house, his body becomes tameh, he becomes the tumah, touching the tumah of the house and entering and being under the roof of the house together with the mace, all happens at the same time. And therefore it'll be chayiv for both of them together. But the Gemara doesn't accept this. Frek the Gemara, but ha'i efshe, it's impossible that he should not touch partially some of the house, some of his body should touch the ear space of the house, and then his whole body enters. Because he's walking into his house, so his nose is going to touch the ear space first. So now that brings tumah on him by his nose touching that ear space. And then afterwards his body enters, and that's the lo yavai, that he's under the roof with the same roof as the mace. So it's still not at the same time. He's already tamei before the yavai, before he comes into the house. Elamar Rave, so Rave says, Hichnis yadai, if he put his hand in first, or the Rosh actually is guided here, not yadai, but Roshai. If he walked in and his head went in first, and like we just said, if the head goes in first, and the nose is the first that enters into the ear space of the house, so then, Mishum Tumeh Ikke, you're right, so the first thing is, he touched the tumah, so he'll be tamei, and mishum biyaleke. The entry that we say that he fully enters into the house, he didn't enter into the house yet, so he's not going to be chayiv for that because he was already tamei from before. But hichnes gufay, how about if the person came with his body in first? What this means is the person leaned back with his head, so he went into the house and he brought most of his body in. But he leaned back with his head. So you can't ask that his nose was in first because he leaned back. So most of his body went inside first. So then tumah be about the adadikasian. So then the tumah and being inside of the house, most of his body being inside of the house comes all at once, and therefore will be chai for both of them together. But again, the Gemara doesn't accept this. It's very interesting how the Gemara goes through all these steps. It's very obvious. It's very obvious that it's impossible that one part of the person's body doesn't come in first. So the Gemara says, even if you're going to lean back with your head, but then your toes are coming first into the house. You're walking in, you're taking a step into the house, so your toes go in first. And then there'll be tumah on your toes, so that's the first tumah of lo yitame. And then the lo yavai entering into the house comes afterwards, and so that's already too late. You shouldn't be chayiv for that. So what does it mean? When did Rabbi say that you're chayiv for entering into the house, that both of them happen together at the same time? Elam Rav Papa, so Rav Papa says the case will be as follows: Kogoin shenichnas b'shida teva or migdal. The person entered into a house and he was inside a box, a closet, or a trunk, various different ways that he came into the house where he was not at all exposed to the tumah of the house, the tumah of the oil, of being lo yava. He didn't, because he's inside a box. Now, so now his friend came and uncovered, opened up the roof of this box or of this trunk. The tumah be about the adadikasian. So now that moment when you open up the cover of this box, so he's became tamei because he now touches the airspace of the house. He's exposed to the airspace because it's open, and that's also the moment of entry that he's there inside the house. So that happens at the exact same second. Okay, so you don't have to think of this in a way how this person somehow came into this in a box in the ear in the house. How exactly does a person come with a box into the house? You could imagine this in a very simple way. If you have a big box that's right at the entrance of the house, and the opening of this box is outside, but then the box goes into the house, onto the roof of the house, and the person walked into this box, and in the interior of this box, he's under the roof of the house. Okay, so he walks into this box, but he's protected. He's not in the house, he's in the box. Well, then his friend comes and then opens up the box that he's inside already, and that second that he opens up this box that he entered into, the interior of the box that's under the roof, he just touched the tumah, and he's under the roof of the house at the same moment, so he's chayav for lo yitame and lo yavi at the same time. That's the case here. Just another detail that the Rishonim add to this, it doesn't mean only that your friend opened up the roof of the house, it has to be that the person himself, the Nazir himself, opened up the roof, or he helped him at least in some way, because if he didn't, so then you're not over on the Isser. He did it, I didn't do anything. So the Gemara is just saying, your friend did it, but it also has to mean that you yourself did something. So this is one example where you can be chayav for both together.
There's three tumas.
Again, what?
So there is three kind of.
Why three?
And there is a tumah that he touches the mess alone.
No, he didn't touch the mess.
No, I'm saying if he touches the mess, that's it.
No, but he didn't. That's not what we're talking about. But once he's tameh because he touched the airspace of the house and and he's under the roof of the house, those are two tumas.
Why do we say it has to come together?
Because if one comes first, then Rabbi says the rule is once you're tameh, you can't become tummy a second time to be chayav a second time. That's Rabbi's opinion. Remember, we had before Rav Yosef said you can be tummy once, but then you'll become tummy a second time. One was bichiburin, shaloi bichiburin. The Gemara explains Rabbi's opinion is if you're tummy and you become tummy a second time, you're not chayav a second time.
Good, but
so
this Isser has two mitzvahs, two
lavim, but no, but it doesn't matter. And chanami, I understand. Okay, but afal pikein. Once he's ready tameh, the lo yavi doesn't add. The lo yavi has to add to the tumah somewhat. It has to be. If it doesn't add anything, so then you can't become. It doesn't affect you. It doesn't change you. It doesn't change your status. But if it's happening at the same time, so you can't say one is more than the other. If it's happening with asachas, then they both apply. Then the lo yitam and the lo yavi applies.
You have to look at the other cases. See that applies to it too. Okay.
The Gemara brings now another example how it's possible that a person should be over on the lo yitama and the lo yavi bevasachas. What's another example? Ma Baravashi says kagoin the ayil keshuhu gaisis. You enter into a house when there's a person there that's about to die. And v'nafik nishmasei ad Yosef, and this person died as you are sitting there. The tumah ubiyah bahadi adadikasyan. So now the tumah, which is the touching of that ear space that you're in, and the biyah, which is that you're there in the same oil under the roof together with this mace, the lo yavai happens at the exact same moment. So here the chiddush of this answer of Ma Baravashi is that this Nazir will be chayav for this, meaning the fact that he entered into a house where there's a geisis. So even though now when he's sitting there, the Nazir could say, I didn't do any action to become Tomei, I'm just sitting there. When I entered, he didn't die yet. Entering into a house when the person is about to die is an action of Isser. You know that he's about to die. You're not allowed to enter into a house of a geisis, and he gets malchus for going into this house where there's a geisis, and then the Tumah and the Biyah happen with Asachas. Okay, so now because we brought up the case of geisis, the Gemara here will focus on this halacha. And here it actually brings it b'nigeya to koyanim. Taner Rabbanon. So we learned in the Braise by the Isser of a koyan not to become tamei. The pasuk says lehei chaloi, that he should not desecrate himself to become tamei. What does this mean? At shah sheyamus. That means that this is until the moment when the person dies. When the person dies, then you're not allowed to become tamei to him. Right? So simply he's saying that a geisis, if there's a geisis, there's no Isser to touch or be in the place of a geisis. Only if he died. Rabbi says, there's another pasuk. We learn out it says, b'moisam, that he shouldn't become tamei to them. Yitambalem b'moisam. So, b'moisam, what does that mean? Yitama ad sheyamus. That you cannot become tamei only when he dies. B'moisam yitama, which means ad sheyamus. When he dies, then you can't become tamei to him. So now, my binayu, what's the difference between these two drushes? Seems to be saying the same thing. Achiyamos, that only when the person dies, then the kayin has the issa to become tamei. Rabbi Yochanan says there's no difference. Mashma is darshan, ikke benayu. The difference is which one of these two psukim do we learn it out from. But the halacha is the same. According to both of them, only when the person actually dies is when the Isser of a Kohen to be Metame applies. Rish Lakish says, no, there is a difference. Gaisis ikibinaya. The person that's about to die, that is the difference between these two drushes. The one, the Tanakh that learns it out from lehechaloi. So that means afil a gaisis. That means even a gaisis. Why does it mean even a gaisis? So the Rishonim explain, because what's a gaisis? A gaisis is a person that's about to die, and there's a klal, roiv gaisis in lemisa. Most people in that situation die. So therefore, when it says in the pasuk lehechaloi, you are desecrating yourself because you know that you're going there inside his house and he's going to die because roiv gaisis in lemisa. So that's included. When it said before, when the Tanakhama said that Shah Shayamos includes the gaisus because you know he's going to die. But Lamanda Ama b'moisam at Shayamos, b'moisam means that the Isser is only when he did die. So at Shayamos in, when he did die, that's when the Isser applies, but gaisus life. If he's about to die, the Isser of the Kayin to become Tamid does not apply. That's the machlokes. So according to the Shlakish, there is an actual machlokes regarding the gaisus. So the Gemara now asks, the Gemara will now explain the drushes of both of these psukim according to both of these mandamim. The opinion that says we learn out from lehechaloi that even by a gaisis there is a issur for the kain to become tamei, but aksiv b'maisam. There's another pasuk that says b'maisam, only if he actually dies. So the Gemara answers that pasuk b'maisam he learns a different drasha. What Rabbi said in the Braisa. The Tanya, it's interesting because over here it was Rebbe that learned it out from B'maisam, and he brings here a different Braisa that Rebbe says in another place differently. The Tanya, Rebbe, Oimer B'maisam Ein Metamem. Well, what does B'maisam mean? That if the person died, so then a dead body, now let it become Tomei to him, Avul Metame B'nigiyasam, B'nigasam or B'zivasam, if the person is a Mitzayre. So you're allowed to become Tomei from him. A kain could become tamei to someone that has a nega or a zav. The whole halacha of a kain not to become tamei is dafke b'maisam, a dead body. That's what we learn out from b'maisam. Now, l'mandama b'maisam, according to the opinion which is Rebbe Take, Rebbe said you learn out from b'maisam that only when he died and not a gaisis. Ha mibayale lahai svara. But Rebbe himself just said that we learn it out for something else. We learn it out for this, that a kain is allowed to become tamei to a mitzayre or a zav. So how does he learn out from this, a different drasha that he said before? So Rabbi says you can learn out both things. Im kain le'mikra b'mais. The pasuk could have just said b'mais when he dies. My b'maisam. Why does it say b'maisam with that extra mem at the end? Shamet mira tarti. We learn out both drashas that it's only when he actually died and only a dead person and not a mitzayre or a zav. Now the Gemara asks the question on the reverse. According to Rebbe, that says that we learn that from b'maisam only if he actually died, the Isser applies. But aksiv lehechale, there's another pasuk that says lehechale. Why doesn't he learn from there that even a gaisus is aser? So he answers lehechale lahachidasa. From the word lehechale, I learn out something else, and that is b'mi she'enoi mechulal. This is what we brought up already before, that the Isser of a kayin to become tamei is only if he's not tamei yet. But if this kayin is already tamei, then there's no issa for him to become tamei again. Okay, we had this already before on Daf Mem Beis. A machlek is exactly how and when that applies. But the point that once the kayin is tamei before, becoming tamei a second time, there's no issa. We learn out from this word lehechale. Once he's already tamei, so then there's no issa. Now, the opinion that we brought before that says that from lehechaloi we learn out that you're not allowed to become tamei to a gaisis. Doesn't he need the word lehechaloi to teach me this halacha that if he's already tamei, there's no issa to become tamei again? So the answer is you can learn both. In kain lemikra lehechal. Could have said lehechal. My lehechaloi. Why is there an extra vav here that he becomes desecrated? Sham tarti. So you could learn out both things over here from this pasuk. Eisvei. So the Gemara now asks on the opinion that says that a gaisis, there's an isser for a kayin to become tamei to a gaisis. So it says in a Braisa b'negei, or a Mishnah actually b'negei to tumeh, adamein metame, a person does not cause any tumeh, ela chetetze nafshe, only if he's completely dead. A dead body causes tumah. Not even if he's about to die, a gaisis does not cause any tumah. Vafilu meguyed, his body is sliced up and he's not going to survive. Vafilu gaisis, a person is about to die, he still does not cause any tumah. So that's a clear Mishnah. So the question is, the opinion that says that you learn out from lehei chaloi that a kayin is not allowed to be metame even to a geisis, hakatani, but we see over here clearly it says the enim metame, that a geisis does not cause any tumah. So how could it say that a kayin is not allowed to become tummy to a geisis? So the Gemara answers, there's a difference. Le'inyin tumuye adanaf genashe. The halacha of tumah is taka only when the person, he's not alive at all. Le'inyin aschule ha'ischo. But regarding the halacha of leheichale, that it says by a kain that he shouldn't desecrate himself, that's even before he dies, even by a geisis. In other words, the answer the Gemara here is, it's telling you that this halacha of leheichale is telling you that not the pshat is that by a kayin, a geisis is already tumah. The geisis is taka not a tumah yet. But nevertheless, it's leheichale. He's desecrating himself, even if there's no tumah, still there's an issa for him to desecrate himself when he's already a geisis. That's the chiddush of the word leheichale.
That's only for the kohen. But
it's only for the kayin, and this is only all according to the opinion of Reish Lakish. According to Rabbi Yechanan, Mashmos Darshanik Benai, according to Rabbi Yechanan, everybody agrees that a kayin is only not allowed to be metam himself to an actual mace, not a geisis. Okay. Amar Rav Chisda says the name of Rav. So this is again continuing halachas all regarding a kayin. Since we started talking about the kayin, so he says another halacha regarding the kayin. So one of the halachas of a kayin is, a kayin head at least, he's allowed to be metam himself to 7 different relatives. But it's not always. So he says the name of Rav, Nikta Roshei Shel Aviv. If a father is one of those relatives that a kain is allowed to become tummy to him, he has an obligation to bury. But if the head is cut off, so it's not the whole body of the father that's together, he can't become tummy to the father. My time, why? That the pasuk when it says the heter for a kain to become tummy to the 7 relatives, and one of them is the father, it says la'aviv. What does that mean? Bizman shu shalim. If it's the whole body of the father, v'lei bizman shu chaser. But if there's a limb that's missing of the body of the father, he's not allowed to become tamei to bury him. That was the halacha of Rav. So Rav Nuna asks on this, Elameyatos. Now if so, ka'azol bepaksa de aravis. What happens? A person is taking a walk with his father in a valley of willows. In other words, in a place which is sort of deserted, and there's bandits there. And then what happened? And bandits came and cut off his father's head. So now the son is there with the father, and he has to bury him. So are you going to say that the son can't bury his father because the body of the father is not whole? So that's the question. It's a very interesting question. It's not clear exactly. There's a big discussion here in the Rishonim what exactly Rav Amnuna meant to ask. The Gemara answers right away than this. Amalei. So Rav Amnuna, Rav Chisda, that is, answered Rav Amnuna, mes mitzvah kamenet. He's giving me an example of this person that's walking with his father in a deserted area, and the son has to bury his father. There's nobody else there. It's a mes mitzvah. Mes mitzvah is a different story, because hashta yesh loymar b'achrini mechayev. Now we know the halacha is that even a mes mitzvah, no one else is there to bury, even if it's not a relative, you're obligated to bury. If it's your father, for sure, the son will have to bury his father. So the Gemara says back, and this is perhaps what Rav Amnuna meant to ask, V'hai mes mitzvahu? Is this really a situation of a mes mitzvah? V'hatanya, but we learned in the Braisa, Ezel mes mitzvah. How do you define a situation where there's a mes mitzvah and the kohen is allowed to be metame himself? Kol she'en le'koivrin, when there's no one to bury this mess. And that means if you can call out, you can call to other people, and they'll respond to you. They can come and help you. Ein zeh mes mitzvah. So there's no mes mitzvah. That's not called a mes mitzvah because other people could come and help you. So over here, the question is, so over here, this father has a son with him, and therefore this son could call out to other people, let him go and call other people to come and bury his father. Because you're telling me, so what Rav Amnuna is saying is, no, this is not called a mes mitzvah, because over here, this son could hire or bring other people to bury his father, so it's not in the category of a mes mitzvah. So the Gemara says, yes, it is. Kivin de ka'azul be'orche, because he's going with his father in this way, it's a deserted area, so yes, could be with big terche, he could find someone else to not come and bury his father, but because he's going in this way, this is in the category of a mes mitzvah, and therefore the son will be allowed to bury his father even if the body is not fully intact, and he's not allowed to be metame, like Rav said, if the body is not fully intact. But over here, this is called a mes mitzvah because it's a deserted area. But another question was asked on Rav Chisda or Rav that said that if the body is not fully intact, you can't be metame. The Brisa says lo yitamo. So in the pasuk there it says la chaysa psula. So you could be the kohen could be metame. So it says lo yitama. You be tamid to her. What does that mean? Why does it say this extra words lo yitama? Lo hu metame. You can be metame to her when she dies, to her body to bury her. But the ene metame leivadel. If one ava got amputated, and she's still alive, you're not allowed to be metame to bury one aver. The fish ain't metame le'aver minachai shall aviv. A kohen is not allowed to be metame to bury even one limb from a father. Okay, so because if when the father is still alive, and the same as a sister or any other relatives, if he's still alive, you're not allowed to be metame just for one limb. Aval machzerhu al etzem kisa'ira. But the Brisa says if the father did die and he was buried, but there was even one tiny little part of the father's body that was left out, even if it's a little bone that's as small as a little barley, you're allowed to go and bury that little part of the father's body. So now what do you see from this Brisa? What does it mean when it says that you're allowed to go and bury even a tiny little part of the father's body as small as a barley? Doesn't that mean the imechsa porta that even if there's a little part that's missing from the father's body, so then there's this halacha that we said before that you can't be metame does not apply, meaning that we see over here that if a person has to bury a small part of the father's body that wasn't buried, he's allowed to be metame for that. So for sure, if the person's father, the kohen's father's body is here and he's just missing one limb, said before, the head got cut off or another limb got cut off, for sure, the kohen is allowed to be metame. This is a clear contradiction to the halacha of Rav. So the Gemara answers, Hahi, Rav Yehuda. Rav will tell you that you're right. That's another opinion. That's the opinion of Rav Yehuda. The Tanya Rav Yehuda, we learned in the Brisa, Rav Yehuda said, Lo metame ve'ene metame levareh. Rav Yehuda says this halacha that when the person, if this kohen has a relative and there's one aver, so you can't be metame. You can't be metame to the avarim. She'ene metame al aver minachai shel aviv. If there's one aver that was amputated, even from a father, you can't be metame. Avul metamahu le'aver min hameis shel aviv. But you could be metame to an aver if the father passed away. So here you see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda said this halacha that if it's an aver of a mace, so then you could be metame. Not like the halacha that Rav said before. Okay, let's finish this inyan. It goes over here to the next Amud, but it's sort of the same inyan over here, so let's finish this inyan. But the Gemara asks from a different Brisa. Rav Kahana taught in a Brisa, but Rav Elazar ben Yaakov said, Lo metame ve'ene metame le'evarim. When it says in the pasuk law, so you can become tamei to the relative himself or herself, but not to evarim. And what do we learn out from this? Prat lekizayis min hameis. If there's only one small part of the mace, like kazayas or kazayas notzol is when it's not, it's liquid. If there's one kazayas or maloi tarvad rekev, if the mace already decomposed and it's just like a spoonful of rekev of dirt from the mace, you're not allowed to be metame to this. That's what we learn out from law. So this is something that's insignificant. You can't become tamei. But now the Brisa continues. You would think that if you have a bigger part of the mace that's still here, shedre, the spine, or the gulgoiles, the skull, or l'reiv binyana, if you have most of the structure of the body, l'reiv binyana, or most of the limbs of the body that are still unburied, so you would think that you're not allowed to, that the kohen is not allowed to be metame. So ksiv, there's an extra pasuk in the beginning when it says va'amarta aleim. Right in the beginning of Parshas Emer, it says Emer ala kohenim, and then it says again va'amarta aleim. Hoysef l'cha hakasuf tuma acheres. It's saying these extra words va'amarta aleim to add another heter for the kohen to be metame in this situation. So the Brisa here makes a distinction. If there's a small part of the body that's left over, which is insignificant, you can't be metame. But if it's roiv binyana, or it's the shedder or the gulgailas, that you are allowed to become tamei. Now, yachal, I would think, lo yitame l'shedre or l'gulgailas or l'roiv binyana or l'roiv minyana shalacherim. I would think that this does not apply to the other relatives that the pasuk says, because we started off with the pasuk of law metame, which refers to one of the relatives, only to a sister. So I would think that it said there, that you're allowed to be metame to a significant part of the body that's still not buried. So I would think that this does not apply to other of the relatives. So you said, no, the same applies to all of the relatives here. Amrit, you say, Ma choisem yuchedes shegufet tali boy. Just like a sister, so she is a relative that her burial is dependent on you. You're a relative, you have the obligation to bury her. Umetame, and you are allowed to be metame l'shedre or l'gulgailis or l'roiv binyana or l'roiv minyana. If it's one of these, which is a significant part of the mace, you're allowed to be metame. Afkal, so too any one of the relatives shagufay tali bay, because the body to bury it is yours. You have the obligation. So metame l'shedre or l'gulgailis or l'roiv binyana or l'roiv minyana. You're allowed to be metame if it's a significant part of the mace. Any of these examples, if it's the spine or the skull or most of the structure of the body or most of the limbs of the body. So again, what do we see clearly here in this brayse? Not like the halacha of Rav. Rav said if there's just one limb missing, if it's not the whole entire body intact, you're not allowed to be metame. Here it says that if it is a significant part of the body, you are allowed to be metame. So the Gemara again answers, Ahim Nami Rabbi Yehudi. This brayse is also following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rav follows the following Tana here. The Tanya we learned in the brayse, Maisa Shemei Sovev Shel Rabbi Yitzchak. There was a story, and the father of Rabbi Yitzchak, which was a Kayin, passed away, Beginzik, in the place Ginzik. And this was far away from where he was, and he didn't know about this. They came and notified him about the fact that his father died and his father was buried after 3 years. And now Rabbi Yitzchak wanted to come and move his father to another place to be buried where he wanted him to be buried. He came and asked Rabbi Shua and other 4 elders that were with him whether he's allowed after all this time to go and move his father's burial. And they answered, Le'aviv. Like Rav said, the pasuk says La'aviv, which means Bizman Shu Shalem. When the father's body is fully intact, you're allowed to be Metame, V'lei Bizman Shu Chaser. Not if there's anything missing. So after 3 years and he was already buried, you're not allowed to move your father. So this is the opinion that Rav went according to.